Hi there, this is week 6 of the course Terrorism and Counterterrorism, comparing theory and practice. In this week we're going to discuss the issue of foreign fighters. Last week we discussed how to deal with terrorism and the impact of terrorism and terrorism related incidents. We looked into under-researched topics and the future of terrorism. Previously that was the last part of this course, but in light of developments in Syria and Iraq, and given the global impact of the foreign fighter phenomenon, we decided to add these videos to the course because it's highly topical and I think it deserves to be part of this course on terrorism. This is the #1 issue on many security agendas around the world. So what are we going to discuss this week? This week we are going to look into the question, why is it making headlines today? What makes it so relevant? What's so important about this phenomenon of foreign fighters? Then we look into the foreign fighters in Syria and Iraq. Questions like, why do they go? What are they doing out there will be addressed. And then third, we're going to look into different foreign fighting groups that are active in Syria and Iraq. And we look at foreign fighters as a potential threat. Do they pose a threat over there or in the countries of origin? And then finally we look into policy options. We do so using the UN counterterrorism strategy as a guideline. Why is it making headlines today? Well, it's very much related to the Syrian uprising and the civil war in Iraq. Well, in Syria, a number of demonstrations in 2011 and in 2012 turned into a civil war between, on the one hand, the regime of Assad and many opponents who wanted to get rid of that regime. But also many joined from outside Syria, so-called foreign fighters. Estimates vary. Mid-2016 the number was believed to be about 30,000 foreign fighters that had traveled to Syria and neighboring Iraq. Europol, the European Union's law enforcement agency, estimated in that same year that about 5,000 Europeans are part of that figure. So it's making headlines because of its international nature, but also because of the fact that it's a very bloody civil war, causing a lot of casualties, people being killed, large numbers of refugees that try to find a safe place, and so on. Add to that the fear that some of these foreign fighters might return to their countries of origin and also start making trouble out there. So what do we know about these people and why do they go? So what about research into this phenomenon of foreign fighters? Well, first, how to define it. I like the definition by David Malet, who defines foreign fighters as non-citizens of conflict states who join insurgencies during civil conflicts. Basically, it's about people that are not part of that country that go to another country to join the fight over there. And this phenomena is not new at all. Let me focus on Europeans, but also others that joined a foreign fight in the past. Think of the Spanish Civil War. Many people from around the world came to Spain in the 1930s. Here you see a picture of Hemingway, the famous American writer, who also joined that civil war. Well, he and other fighters joined either the conservative Franco side or the leftist side with the international brigades, which received around 40,000 foreign fighters. Hemingway was part of the latter group. Well, another example from the 1930s was the invasion of Finland by the Soviet Union in 1938, the so-called Winter War, the big red army against small Finland. No other country went to the aid of Finland. But thousands of volunteers did, mainly from Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, but also from Britain, Germany, Hungary and other states. And then more recent examples. Afghanistan. Also after the invasion of the Soviet Union, 1979, a lot of people came to the aid of the Afghans as Muslim fighters that wanted to defend after the country had been attacked by the Soviet Union. And also another example from the past is Bosnia in the early 1990s. There were a lot of people who came to the aid of the Bosnians and Bosnian government and also some to other sides that were involved in that civil war. Well, what do we know about this phenomenon? What do we know from research? If I have to recommend one general study about foreign fighters, it's the book by David Malet. Here you see the cover. Title is Foreign Fighters, Transnational Identity in Civil Conflicts. Malet collected data on foreign fighters and looked into civil conflicts between 1815 and 2005. And he discovered in the 331 cases that he studied that there were at least 70 of them featuring foreign fighters. So it's not a new phenomenon, and it's happening in 70 out of more than 300 cases in the past. But there are surprisingly few studies. And most studies on foreign fighters are case studies about countries or single cases, individuals. And they are mainly descriptive in nature and look at numbers and trends, but there are no general explanations for this phenomenon. And again, the exception to the rule is the book by Malet. A few more exceptions. A study by Mustafa about the Mujahideen in Bosnia that describes foreign fighters as cosmopolitan citizens and/or terrorists. And a book by Mark Sageman, very well-known book, Understanding Terror Networks, that partly looked into foreign fighters in Afghanistan. But who are these people? What does the individual foreign fighter look like? Well, we know very little about foreign fighters on the individual level. What's the motivation of persons to go and join a fight abroad? There's also little known about what happens to them after their return or after their reintegration. We know that thousands of people in the past have gone to places to fight as foreign fighters. Some have died, but many have returned. But how? What happened afterwards? And what have they done after their return? There's not so much written about the organizational aspects and obstacles. How do you manage to get to a foreign country? People might want to join the group, but how do you make that happen? Are they accepted or not? And we also know very little about why some persons might have had the idea or even expressed the idea that I'm going to join the fight, but in the end, for certain reasons, they did not go. We can draw some conclusions on the yet relatively limited body of knowledge. Well, these conclusions are not very surprising. They go for ideological or religious reasons or politically religious reasons. It's often organized or part of a larger movement, a transnational movement. And they're mainly young, and they're mainly male. And most historical cases are cases in which governments or governmental actors directly or indirectly sponsored it. Well, after 2012, you could say our understanding of the phenomenon of foreign fighters has improved or has been updated. There's a lot more recent interest in the study of foreign fighters. We see a sudden increase in publications, reports, etc., mainly by governmental agencies, think tanks and consultants, and relatively few scholars, at least until recently. We also see that many of these studies, especially from the West, are alarmist in nature. They focus on the potential threat to the countries of origin, and they're very policy oriented, focusing on prevention, the return and reintegration of foreign fighters. There seems to be less attention for the impact on the ground, in Syria and Iraq, and elsewhere. To what extent do these foreign fighters contribute to the atrocities? Are they a fighting force to be reckoned with, or are they just cannon fodder or a nuisance to these fighting groups? Or are they very important mainly for propaganda reasons? And also an important question is, are they accepted by the local population or not? They claim to defend these people, but do these people want to be defended by these foreign fighters? Well, we can explain the boom in studies and reports as these are pressing issues that governments face. And they provided funds to do research. Well, we at Leiden University and at the ICCT have done so by looking at the phenomena from many different angles. From the impact that this phenomenon has on inter- and intra-faith relations, to the role of parents and communities, to the international dimension, the military and diplomatic side of it. Well, research is also possible and very interesting because of the possibility to have access to key players, the foreign fighters themselves. We discovered with my team that it's actually surprising how many of them want to talk to you, or people that have had the intention to go want to talk to you, either directly or by way of social media. Well, this has changed a bit in the last few years now that an increasing number of foreign fighters have been convicted for terrorism. So they're a lot less open now, of course, about what they are doing there than they were, for instance, in 2013 and 2014. But it's still possible to talk to them. To sum up, foreign fighters are not a new phenomenon, but it's surprisingly under-researched, at least until recently. There has been a boom after 2012 because of the situation in Syria and later also in Iraq. And it's actually quite surprising how many opportunities there are to study today's foreign fighters. In the next video, we'll look into foreign fighters in the Middle East. Who are these people and why did they go to join the fight out there?